God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea. God is our refuge and strength.
Welcome to Mission 66, a ministry of TWR and Dr. Luis Sayao. Today, we're in the book of Psalms, a collection of praise and prophecies, many written by King David and originally set to music. You can follow along with your downloadable study guide. Pick it up at mission66.org. Let's join teacher John Matthews and co-host Esther Sisulu for our discussion.
Welcome to our program of Bible exploration, where we read it chapter by chapter and discuss what it has to say to us. Well, our teacher is John Matthews, and today, leading us through the book of Psalms, we'll be focusing on Psalms 42 through to 48. And today's theme, Safety in Zion.
Esther, thank you so much, and a very warm welcome to this latest episode of Mission 66. As always, so good to have your company today. And we're continuing our journey through what could be called musical notes found in the book of Psalms as we see these beautiful melodies coming out of this book. And today we're looking at Psalm 46 and Psalm 48. And the theme is safety in Zion, as Esther just said. Now, you may know that Zion is the poetic name for the beautiful and majestic city of Jerusalem, which was the capital of Israel, the great capital of the Davidic Empire. Famous, of course, holy city that has been much talked and sung about through the centuries. And this psalm here, along with Psalm 48. They're psalms dedicated to celebrating that city, a celebration, in fact, of the fact that God kept the city safe.
Well, John, before we continue any further, what is the time period here?
Well, yeah, interesting question. We don't have the exact details and specific dates of these psalms, but Psalm 46 is certainly one that was written after the Davidic period and before the Babylonian captivity. It's a psalm of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth. It's a song. And the psalmist is then going to begin celebrating the fact that God had kept the city of Jerusalem, to this point, safe in saying, Psalm 46, here we go. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. As is well known, the famous city of Jerusalem is located there in this mountainous region. It's surrounded by several peaks, or I suppose more like hills rather than the image of steep peaks. But it's certainly in this hilly mountainous region. The city itself is on a hill, on an elevated slope, and then you've got this deep valley that heads towards the river Jordan. And so the city of Jerusalem itself made up of these several hills, and it evokes this extraordinary poetry really here, where the psalmist expresses that he is safe, even though an earthquake takes place, which was common of the day and known by people in biblical times. But of course, he's talking about more than just the earthly Jerusalem, isn't he? And the psalmist expresses his trust in God. Here in verse 4, it says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice. The earth melts. And the question arises in our minds is, how can the psalmist feel so safe? Why is his trust so great? It seems a little exaggerated. And we might say, well, look, where does this trust come from? So then there comes a phrase that is important, so much so that it's repeated in both verse 7 and 11. This is it. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Observe there the hope of the psalmist based on the examples we've seen through the history so far of the world in the Bible, the story of Jacob, the great Hebrew patriarch of the past, who found himself in a situation so complex in life that he learned to depend completely on the safety that was provided by God, and he was blessed as a result of that. And the proof that God takes care of Israel and Jerusalem is found throughout history, and based on this sense of trust, but also the fact that God honours those who honour him. And this was clearly a period where they sensed that presence of God. And the psalmist then presents us this source of his trust. And important to remember that this psalm was being sung in the temple. Therefore, this song is for the director of music and those who sang it, probably a choir. And there's the high possibility that this was really a song because there are indications to higher notes.
Oh, yeah, John. It's probably the sopranos who would sing the different notes along with the rest, singing in harmony. I can just imagine what that harmonious sound could have sounded like.
Yeah, probably something like that, similar to the artistic presentations that we might see in churches in our world today. And so with this, Esther, this great, this joyful, this exuberant expression of trust, the psalm continues in verse 8 saying, "Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire." Now, what is the great fear that we have living in our urban places, our big cities, in our world? Well, there's fear, isn't there, of war, of violence, of anything that can impact me. And the words in the psalm here are clear when it says that God allows things to happen as far as his sovereignty is in control. He's the one who ends wars. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear. In other words, there is no power as great as he, and no power, no matter how strong it may seem on our earth, can even face the living God or interfere with his ultimate plans and projects for our world. God, no matter what we see around us, remains the Almighty God today, and this is why he is the Lord of the armies. And so verse 10 captures our attention when it tells us not to depend on human strength or trust in human wisdom, and certainly not to depend on the power of mankind. It says this in verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." The God who provides safety for Zion, for Jerusalem, for you and for me. He's the one who sustains us now, the one who's responsible for the fact that you and I are alive listening to this right now. This same God exalted among the nations, he is Lord of all the earth.
This is Mission 66, our Bible exploration program, led and guided by our teacher, John Matthews. I'm Esther, your host, and I suppose at this point, John, we can move on to Psalm 48.
Yeah, and Esther, Psalm 48 continues in the same vein with the same spirit and the same attitude that we witnessed there in Psalm 46. It's also in Psalm 48 a celebration of the safety provided for Zion, because first there's a description here of the beauty of the city of Jerusalem. Now, for those who know and have seen the city, it's easy to confirm what's being said here by just watching the sun set in Jerusalem, surrounded by mountains, and of course a city with hugely historical significance, some 3,000 years of history in the context of the Hebrew civilization. So this captures our attention. And so the psalmist celebrates these enemy attacks as not being capable of destroying the safety of Zion. Such is the power of its God, and Zion is therefore calm and tranquil, and Jerusalem is there because God has intervened in history, delivering through history, drawing mankind back to himself from the day he created the earth and sin came into the earth as a result of mankind's actions. And there's a declaration really of peace and tranquility here when the psalm says in verse 1, "Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. His holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, is the joy of all the earth." Reference to Israel, the holy mountain, a reference to the majestic mountain where the temple was built. Important to observe the clear historical context of Psalm 48, verse 4. "For behold, the kings assembled. They came on together. As soon as they saw it, they were astounded. They were in panic. They took to flight. Trembling took hold of them there. Anguish as of a woman in labor. By the east wind you shattered the ships of Tarshish." God, you see, the one who guarantees the safety of the city of David, the city of Zion, the city of Jerusalem. Verse 8, "In the city of our God, which God will establish forever." And the psalm continues saying in verse 9, "We have thought on your steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your temple." His unfailing love is the love of his promise, his covenant, the love that God has for this earth and here for the nation of Israel, and his contract that is kept as a sign of his love, his loyalty, his faithfulness. Verse 10, "As your name, O God, so your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with righteousness. Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments." Verse 12, "Walk about Zion, go around her, number her towers, consider well her ramparts, go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God, forever and ever. He will guide us forever." Well, as we listen to this, listeners, we'll certainly observe and may have a thought about the power of armies or the potency of some countries with their weapons in our world today. We may see an apparently immovable human power growing, multiplying with deadly lethal force in its hands, or certainly within its control. And maybe these people want to do evil for humanity and even threaten the safety of the planet. That's a real thing that we think about, isn't it? But the truth is we don't have to worry or be concerned about any of that, because we know that God, the same God who kept the city of Jerusalem safe, that same God is in control, and all power and dominion, that is all control over history, belongs to him. It doesn't belong to that nation or this nation or that many nations' nuclear arsenals or this nation's power. It's irrelevant when it comes to God. He and he alone has the world in his hands, and he alone will call time when he returns, when Jesus returns the second time. So we can be sure, and we can't sometimes understand this, that everything that happens has been allowed by God in accordance to what is written and predicted by the very words of the Bible itself. So we should trust God and praise and exalt his name, because he is the Lord of armies and he is with us. He is our refuge. God is our refuge, our tower of defense. This God, yes, this is our God now and forever. And he will continue to guide us until the end of time. And the end of time will only be the very doorway to eternity and forevermore.
Ah, amen, John. Thank you. I'm wondering about Zion and whether you think that Zion was ever truly safe. I ask this because earlier on you said that Jerusalem was an indestructible city that God kept safe. But by my recollection, wasn't it destroyed by the Babylonians around the year 600 BC?
Well, it certainly raises a question because you have, Esther, don't you, the promise of keeping Jerusalem safe. And you're right, not too long after the city was conquered by Babylon, this foreign nation. So how do we understand what happened? The truth is this: God had promised to keep his own people safe. And it's true that they were safe and confident in that safety. But there's one important detail to consider here. God had established a covenant. It's an agreement with his people, saying, look, if you turn your back to me and disobey my commands, and you go after false gods, disown me and worship them, then you will suffer the consequences of that choice. That, of course, is justice. Of course, that must be the way. And what happened? Well, exactly that. Exactly that. Zion breaks the covenant. And so what's the outcome? Well, God no longer keeps them safe. In fact, the prophet Jeremiah was the one who was especially sent by God to the people of Israel. And he says to them, the safety that God has provided you with is now over, because God has handed the city over to the Babylonians. So we have to understand that nobody can overcome the power of God. And we can trust the safety that God provides us with. But when God decides to act and discipline his people, the scenario changes and the focus is a different one.
Wow, that's very insightful, John. Well, look, Psalm 46 also has the subtitle, right? For the choir director, a song of the descendants of Korah to be sung by soprano voices. So what do you think is the deal with these high-pitched voices here?
Well, look, you have probably the choir director or the leader of the singing saying here how each part was to be sung. And this psalm was probably sung as a responsive psalm or a responsive song. So the leader might say or sing, "The Lord Almighty is with us." Then the others would sing by way of response the following verses of the psalm. And this reveals a moment when praise and worship are organised. And this was during the time of the first temple, the time of the Temple of Solomon, when the monarchy was already a reality in Israel. And this is why I think some believe that this may have been written and sung during the time of Hezekiah. Now, what may seem strange and a little different for us here is the expression we see in some translations that says to be sung by soprano voices, because the Hebrew phrase literally says by women. So that leads obviously to the suggestion that there was a mixture of people in the choir in the temple in the time of the Old Testament. And so this may well have been women singing or a group of male singers that had higher voices. We don't know that, but that's what we can certainly speculate, and that's all it is. By the way, Esther.
Yeah, all right, John. Well, an important observation is that the women did have a special place for them in worship service in the time of the Old Testament. All right, well, as we move on and we look at verse 10 in chapter 46, this is such a famous verse amongst Christians, and it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Well, I know for a fact that this verse has changed and transformed and encouraged so many around the world. But let's get into what exactly this verse means.
Yeah, good observation, Esther. And important to, I think, observe this carefully. First, I think we need to see that the whole context of this psalm, especially from verse 8 onwards, and it actually goes from verse 8 to verse 10, and the context has to do with war, with battle and conflict. So this is the original idea of the text. When we look at the original text, the verse is going to say, "Be still and know that I am God." It means stop, calm down. Look, I listened to a song this morning and it wisely contained these lyrics. Rid me of my quickness, I'll be soon to listen. Slow feet, slow plans, steadfast in patience. It seems as though the slower I go, the faster I arrive. When it comes to your spirit, we're not in a hurry. It's as relevant today, Esther, as it was then. Amidst all the rush and the noise, be still and know that I am God. God seeks our attention. God seeks the silence in which he can speak to us, in which he can minister to us, in which he can calm our hearts and settle us down and shift our perspective in a moment. Be still and know that I am God.
Yeah, those words truly resonate. And, when you think about being still, I very often think about the songs that we sing in our churches today about mountains. And I think it may be true for very many of us that we usually like to go off to far off and quiet places where we can have that intimate moment with the Lord, where we can be still with him. And I think this is what we see in Psalm 48. Hey, John. So, the psalmist is talking about this. What do you think? Is this the right thing for us to do?
Well, look, important to demonstrate our love, our gratitude to God for everything in whatever way seems appropriate. And we can do that in different poetic ways, and creativity is so welcome and from God. Well, Jesus himself, we see in the New Testament, goes to a quiet place to meet with his Father. And that's what we should do too. It's that one-on-one intimate connection with Jesus that is so important for us. And so, yes, it's important. And some people in and surrounded by the beauty of creation feel that they are close to God as well.
This is fantastic, John. What an insightful journey through Psalms 46 and 48. So let's move on to the final summary to get a sense of what we've learned today.
Yeah, well, today, Esther, on Mission 66, we were in Psalms 46 and 48. And we were talking about safety in Zion with God's protection around that place. And here we see exactly what we can take from all of this and indeed apply to our lives after we go through these words carefully. And after hearing about everything that these Psalms have to tell us, we actually reach a final and important summary, and that is that the God who acted in the past on behalf of his people will act the same way today, and he will act the same way in the future. Never forget that, because with God, we always have safety. And the beauty and the reality is this, is that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore.
Dear friends, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Mission 66. And my hope is that your heart and your mind is being transformed for the glory of God. Well, Mission 66 is heard around the world each day, and we depend on your prayers and your generous support to continue this ministry. If it is on your heart, and perhaps you can prayerfully consider making a gift to this ministry today by visiting mission66.org. That's mission66.org. Well, our journey through the book of Psalms continues next time, so please join us then. Until then, may God bless you.
As Mission 66 comes to a close, be sure to download your free study guide at mission66.org. Deepen your daily devotion with insights from each episode, and let John and Esther lead you through the scriptures. Get your study guide at mission66.org and be prepared for our next episode. There, you can also connect with us, ask questions, or donate to help Mission 66's worldwide outreach. Head to mission66.org. Mission 66 is made possible through Transworld Radio in partnership with Dr. Luis Sayao.